Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to be doing this after lunch as opposed to before lunch. My name is Jonathan, and we are Team R8. Now, I'll be introducing some of the themes that we'll be talking about later on, and to set a little of the background. And then Karen and Suzanne will follow through on some of the projects that we're proposing. So this name R8, not only a catchy tag, because we all know that architects love to name themselves using letters and numbers only. But R8 also describes our interest in the New York City zoning district of that name, R8, permitting the densest mid-rise housing in the boroughs of Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. But before we get to the zoning issues and the sites, I think it would be helpful to flash back to the good old 70s, when the city was even in worse financial shape than it is now, and to talk about the options that a single man or woman coming to New York and just starting out had in terms of inexpensive and safe housing. Now, these are 4 examples of single-only buildings in which, for example, a young 22-year-old secretary on Wall Street or a 25-year-old Navy machinist recently back from overseas could live in at that time. This is the Barbizon, Covenant House, YMCA, and a Salvation Army building. These single-room occupancy buildings offered safe, inexpensive rooms, sometimes with shared bathrooms and kitchen facilities. So you can see that at one point in the 70s, there were thousands of these units available to a young person coming to New York. They were also pretty affordable on a weekly basis, and these are in 2011 terms. These were considered affordable small apartments. We're going to fast forward to 2011. Over the past 40 years, as the city saw the evisceration of the manufacturing sector, the gradual growth of income inequality, speculative development of high-end condo buildings catering to the affluent, and the proliferation of hotels and temporary lodging responding to the needs of international tourism, the scene at these particular buildings today is vastly different. The Barbizon is now a condo with 66 units. Salvation Army on Gramercy Park has recently undergoing renovation, 17 units, 1 unit per floor as opposed to 300. The Hudson Hotel still has 424 units, as does the Maritime at 316. But one is $189 a night, the other's $255. The condos, $700 a square foot, and to live on Gramercy Park in the old Salvation Army building now will cost you $1,200 per square foot. So during these same 40 years, we've witnessed the explosive rate of homelessness, some due to the release from psychiatric institutions of hundreds of mentally ill individuals who, when sent out into the urban world, many, by the way, without any community-based housing or services, were reminded by their caregivers to, quote, make sure you take your meds. Now, in response to this untenable situation, we also at the same time witnessed the creation of something called supportive housing. Supportive housing is a publicly funded hybrid SRO housing type combining small studio units with supportive services, medication management, counseling, job training, and including congregate spaces such as library, dining room, lounges, and exercise room. My firm has been designing over the past several years this type of permanent housing, often on inexpensive and irregular or remnant lots found throughout Brooklyn and the Bronx. Now, this doesn't really look like New York City fabric, but it is. These are the kind of in-between lots that are available cheaply, in most cases, for not-for-profit developers. The 4 plans that you see here are for buildings with range in size from 43 units to 72 units. The units, as you can see, are organized around exterior courts and gardens which provide safe and attractive gathering spaces, what we call outdoor rooms, for their formerly homeless residents. In all cases, by the way, in these buildings, We're maximizing floor area as per HPD requirements, and we meet all applicable zoning and code requirements. We use iron spot brick for the exterior, high-performance envelope, energy-efficient and state-of-the-art sustainable building systems, and all public and private spaces are constructed using durable, high-quality finishes. Those are the interior living room courts. This is a typical studio apartment. It has a 10 by 14 living space with bed and table, a 10-foot-long kitchen, and a full bathroom. Our firm also designed the unit furniture in collaboration with the Brooklyn-based furniture maker. So it all looks nice, right? Here's the rub. If you or me or anyone else in this room wanted to rent one of these apartments, you could not do so. Unless, unless you had either been diagnosed as mentally ill or were from the local community and designated as working poor. Nor could a for-profit developer who wished to build this type of building for the general public be permitted to, according to the current zoning and DOB regulations. And to understand why, you need to understand the difference between use group 2 and use group 3 in the zoning ordinance. And this is not a lecture about zoning, but this is a really, really important point in differentiating between residential or building under residential code and building under community facility code. The use group 2 encompasses residential structures of all kinds, from single-family homes to multiple-family residence, while use group 3 includes among its community facility uses a variety of housing types, including monasteries, dormitories, hospital staff dwellings, and something called not-for-profit with sleeping accommodations, which is the group under which we file our supportive housing buildings. The major differences are as follows. In UG2, parking is required, usually one space per apartment. In use group 3, no parking requirements. The density formula that was spoken of just recently in the panel, 740 in an R8 zone. That means you divide the total square footage of your possible building by 740. In other words, 740 represents the total gross of one apartment. Whereas when we designed for HPD, the critical number is 520, meaning you divide 520 into your total square footage, and that's how many units you need to produce. That's a huge, huge difference in terms of average apartment size. And finally, there's a courtyard differentiation. In residential zoning, minimum courtyard width is 30 feet and minimum square footage is 1,200. In use group 3, it's reduced 20 feet legal light and air as opposed to 30, 600 square feet as opposed to 1,200 for the court size. So when it came to the purchase and development of the Bronx Park trapezoidal site, which you'd seen in one of the slides before, our not-for-profit client bought that site, and up until that point, it had been considered undevelopable, as attested on the left side by the single-family dwelling that was built in the 20s, which had remained on that site up until the time that the not-for-profit bought the site. In other words, the site made no economic or social sense as a multifamily dwelling, but it did as a supportive housing facility because of the difference between use group 2 and use group 3. So here's our proposal. Let's let use group 3 regulations apply to any site or development which can provide this badly needed housing to the single and non-nuclear population making up the current underground housing market. And so now to the motivating ideas behind Team R8, and then I'll pass it on. We propose to expand the housing options with single and shared units in dense mid-rise buildings. We took as our area of investigation 3 swaths of R8 zoning in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. These occur along the Grand Concourse in the Bronx, along the newly upzoned 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, and along Broadway in Washington Heights. This is dense urban fabric in these neighborhoods And finally, this slide shows the vacant lots or one-story commercial buildings we are considering as potential sites. We chose the Grand Concourse as our area of operations because we felt it offered an underutilized and underappreciated urban structure within which our interventions could provide a new, dense typology and perhaps revitalize the concourse as a vibrant urban boulevard. And here's Karen to continue.
Thank you. So the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. We chose a site between 180 and 180th Street and 187. We looked at 4 specific sites. We're going to talk to you about what we've done on those sites and what that does for the whole area. The project recalls a former glory of the Grand Concourse. We know that the southern part has recently been designated an historic district. The site has beautiful 1920s buildings with one-story commercial periodically, and we're taking advantage of that. There's great public transport. There's the D and the Q train, retail, dining, and entertainment, close to Fordham University, but currently it's underused. As you can see here, we're looking at these 4 sites with one-story commercial. The first part of this project is to green the Grand Concourse. We believe that we bring the green and the development will follow. And we're proposing 4 complementary building types to go in this area. What we're challenging is the homogeneity of current housing development. And we're looking at the lack of options that exist now and looking at expanding options for singles who wish to live independently and who also want to live in the city and have access to community and amenities. The idea is that the city is really your living room. So if we take a section through this site, we see the first building we'll talk about in the context of the Grand Concourse. The subway is right there, runs along the Grand Concourse, and we see the greening scheme and how it goes into the building, into the courtyard and up onto the roofs. So the first building is called the Mix. We call it that because we'll describe the series of different kinds of housing that are in this building. Going back to Jonathan's point about density allowed with the regulations we're talking about, under user 3, you get 137 units. Otherwise, it would be 96 units in this building. So this is the existing commercial. I'll just take you through this as it gets built up. We carve through the building and create an entry and a core. And as we build up, we see that we're operating within the allowable zoning building envelope. We're maximizing FAR, but it's a much denser building that could otherwise be built. And we're taking opportunities where we can. So we see, instead of just having corridors used as corridors, these are actually communal spaces. We're borrowing light from the lot line, and we have a double height space at the end with a hold-open door, fixed furniture that creates a really informal social space to go along with the apartment. So the setback, there's a terrace, and then at the top, there's a roof garden. So this is the Mix. We have 4 types. We have the studio, the single, the loft, and the duplex. And this really, again, challenges the standard unit mix that you see that's out of line with who lives in New York and the way that we need to live. And this housing works because of the public spaces that exist both in the building and outside. And these are indicated here. So I'll go through the 4 types that are in this building. First, we have the studio. This is the most private unit, has a full private kitchen and bath. This is 290 square feet, $750 per person, or the one person who lives there. Then we have another option that says if you're really interested in something economical, this is a single where you have a small space with a sink and shared bath and kitchen down the hall. Talking about shared living for our loft, we're also loft fans. So this is a loft that has where there's public space, and the bedrooms and the storage actually become furniture, movable furniture, for this shared option. The last scheme within this building is the duplex. It happens at the setback, and it takes advantage of the narrow space, and it's economical because there's corridor only every other floor. So this is a share, and I'm going to talk to you about our friend who lives there. His name's Juan. And I'm going to take you through a day in his life. He wakes up in the duplex, and he goes downstairs where there's an office space within the building, checks his email. Then he goes down the street to get some coffee at his favorite bodega, goes across the street to meet his buddy, and then he goes over, plays a little bit of basketball, goes and takes a shower, and then he comes back and he sits on the terrace and decides where he's going to go to salsa that night, somewhere in the Grand Concourse. Turn to Susanna for the next building.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce the next 3 buildings. After the mix, we're now onto the Flux, which is a little further down. It's on the corner of 182nd Street, right at the subway station. And what we're trying to challenge with the Flux is the issue of size. Thank you that somebody brought that up. Actually, some people would like large spaces. Some people actually have children. Some people like rooms with doors, and they don't want to live in a loft. So we're challenging the typical units that get developed, which Matthew Blesso brought up, end at sort of the 2-bedroom unit. Why not a 7-bedroom unit? Why not the Upper West Side in the Bronx today? So looking at the ground floor, we have retail always. We introduce 2 cores, scissor stairs, and an elevator. Above that, we again operate with courtyards. And the key thing here is how many units can you access from one of these cores, and how could you subdivide these units? So all we're really providing is the shell, the core, and the wet wall locations. I'm going to walk you through one scenario. Remember, this is one scenario of about 100 that could happen here. I'm also happy to learn that 2,300 square feet is the standard average American house size, so we actually just hit it intuitively. So imagine this 2,300 square foot unit. Does this work? Access through 2 doors. What could happen here? Imagine this, 7 bedrooms. It's wonderful. They're all fairly large, 11 by 15 feet. And we have the cores in the center. Hold on. Private spaces are indicated in brown. The share spaces are in ochre, and the shared utilities intermediate zone. So the key here is flexibility. You can either easily extend the public space. So if this is your living, dining area, if you open this up, it becomes 1 floor through with views of the Grand Concourse all the way through. You can also expand the other way if you like, and this becomes a large dining room. And all the spaces are interconnectable through sliding panels along. So the idea is you can circulate around and you have multiple paths within your unit. So what is a scenario? One scenario is Jose and Emma, who have a 3-year-old daughter, Emily. And Jose is a programmer and needs a home office. So they sort of occupy this part of the unit. And they can connect through here. They use this bathroom. Carmen is Emma's best friend. She's an architect. Emma is a nurse. So they both work out of the house. Carmen is a single mom. Her son is 4. His name is Mohammed. He gets the unit that can open up to a big playroom, and they can use this bathroom. Now, it so happens that Juan, whose name is also Juan, but it's a different Juan. He doesn't live in the mix. Juan works in development, and he just got relocated from Miami to New York. He's a widower, but he likes to have his female friends over. He also would like to take care of his grandchild. So it so happens this can easily be subdivided. Imagine a door here. This is an accessory unit. He has his own unit, but if he has to babysit, he can just pass through here. Now, we all know that things change. Emma has a 2nd baby. She needs more room. It's baby Lou. So baby Lou gets this room. Mohammed moves over, and it also just so happens that Juan has to move to Kansas City because his job gets relocated. So they decide to hire a nanny. And the nanny has a 1-bedroom apartment. Again, the wall would have to be reconfigured here. So the idea of these units are, there's a variability in it, which is very simple to accommodate groupability within the unit, but it's also actually a very traditional unit. There's nothing really new about this. So if you can expand the scenario into the rest of the building. These could be very large units, but they could also be subdivided through the multiple access points that they have. So they could all have accessory units, home offices, nannies, what you need. So right across the street from this intersection is another vacant site, and the duplex is going up here. This is a building that is comprised solely of duplexes for the people who don't want to live on a floor through 1-floor apartment, but have always dreamed of the 2-story house in the city. And the design for this is so elegant and sophisticated, we're not showing it to you today. And our fourth project is the SRO Redux. Here we're directly taking on the notion that the SRO is an outmoded way of living. We actually think it's very in demand and might just need to be expanded by the notion of the live-work. The single bedroom of 80 square feet is absolutely fine, but maybe you need just a little bit more to work from the house. So live-work not just for people who happen to have bought a loft in Tribeca in the 1970s, but live-work for somebody, young independent professionals today. If you notice, it's right up here, building, and it steps up into a tower piece. Ground floor is the public space, entrance, bicycle parking. It's organized around an open courtyard. Some of the facilities are open to the public, bar, and retail. Central core, and you arrive at this U-shape or A-shape organized around a central courtyard. Single-loaded corridors, which are direct revision of the double-loaded corridor, which was much maligned in the SRO, and organizing these total of 38 rooms per floor, typical floor, into clusters of 6, which share, 6 units share a kitchen and 3 bathrooms. How does this work? So you have your single-loaded corridor along the courtyard, so you have light and air. It's lined with a counter. This is where you arrive. It's also where your kitchen is, and you use the corridor. The corridor is not just a corridor, but it's a space to use. Coming from the other end, that's where your visitors come. But you're still asleep in the morning, and this is your bedroom zone. It's actually 8 by 10 feet. These are a little bit larger. That's all you need. You need the bed, you need a view of the Bronx, of the Grand Concourse, that's it. But the trick is by offsetting these walls, you have a bit of a visual privacy, and you have an intermediary zone where you could work. And from that zone, you enter a bathroom that you share with your immediate neighbor. So rather than going out in your bathrobe, you can actually just show your neighbor your bathrobe. So those are the 3 zones, and so we're basically using the depth of the building to create a hierarchy of shared single plus and single spaces. And this could actually work. This was a section through the room where you might sleep in. You might still be in here. You don't want to see anyone. You close the door. Your neighbor already has his light falling out, his coffee mug on the counter. Slowly you rise. You move into your plus zone where you go and clean yourself up. And then when you feel like it, you can actually go outside and socialize or meet the editor who's been waiting for your piece that you were finishing last night for the deadline. So again, this is one cluster. Again, you can spin the scenario further. Jonathan.
So to conclude, this is an image showing a project from the 70s supported by UDC, which is to build middle-class housing in the Bronx. Architects such as Passanella and Klein, Richard Meyer, Polshek, a whole series of really high-class architects working in the housing mode and doing the research and making these ambitious proposals for middle-class housing near, in fact, the Grand Concourse and very near to the sites we've chosen. So we feel we're ambitious, but the ambitions shown in the housing movement of the 70s was even grander. I think it's time that we really took on the mantle of building housing for a very misrepresented group in the housing stock in New York. And I think the rebuilding of the Grand Concourse is the first place to start. Thank you.